Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards, the podcast in which we assess the Game Awards of the past, and, well, rearrange them quite a bit. So, this is actually a pretty special show, because, well, we're going to be talking about 2013. Because if you guys are not familiar with this particular series, because I know there's been quite a bunch of new people who have been joining into these streams. Basically, this is a series where I pretty much look at what was at the Game Awards of past years, video game awards, by the way, and I pretty much choose my own nominees, choose my own winners, and even choose my own categories to be a bit more consistent and to be fair about games that pretty much came out around the same time as a lot of these award ceremonies. And, well, we're going to be talking about the year 2013, because we've been going backwards in time rather than forward, so that's fun. Admittedly, I did regret that decision, but at the end of the day, I'm going to commit to it because, I like doing this series, and I like being able to talk about this. And, well, we officially reached over a decade ago as far as these particular episodes are concerned. And yeah, but before we actually get into the episode in particular, I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to something that came out 20 years ago that honestly kind of means a lot to me. And if you guys are, regulars of the channel, you know exactly what's going to come up. Because, well, today is in fact the 20th anniversary of, in my opinion, one of the best albums of all time, My Chemical Romance's Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Three cheers for sweet revenge. Yeah, 3 cheers for sweet revenge. So things are better if I'd stayed. So long and good night. So long and good night. But I have to give this a shout out because even though we're not doing our normal podcast anymore, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. Classic album from 2004. As a matter of fact, I've got my copy right here for you guys. I guess I can just kind of zoom in a little bit right here. So, of course, also I'm wearing the shirt for it. But yeah, this means a lot to me as a person because, well, this is my favorite My Chemical Romance album, and it's one of my favorite albums, just period. And let's just say that this holds a special piece in my heart because, well, this ultimately was the thing that got me into a lot of emo, which I know there's going to be nerds out there being like, that's not real emo. Bitch, have you not heard Ghost of You? Have you not heard Helena? Or shit, I'll even argue some of the other deep cuts on this album, i.e. The Jet Set Life Is Gonna Kill You, or even just the fact that there's the song, the B-sides song, Desert Song. So yeah, no, they're more than qualified for emo by both definitions. And, well, this is one of my favorite emo and punk albums and post-hardcore albums ever. So I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to good old 3 cheers for sweet revenge right there. Because I don't know any other better time I would be able to give a shout out to one of the best albums ever. But of course, we're not here to talk about that. As much as I would love to gush about this for the next 3.5 hours, this is not what we'll be talking about. We gotta talk about 2013, as far as video games are concerned. And, well, 2013, honestly, in hindsight, was actually another really damn good year for gaming. I was not expecting that at all, because, obviously a lot of the Game Awards that we've talked about, or even just years that we've talked about for the series, haven't been very good. 2015, 2021, 2018, 2022. So, as far as, game releases. Yeah, there haven't been too many bright spots. Though, to be fair, 2016 was actually a really good year in hindsight as far as game releases. Go watch our episode on that if you want to catch up to speed on that. But as far as a year like 2013, I was genuinely surprised with how many just bangers that came out this year. Sure, there were some crappy games, and in our old podcast series, we even talked about, honestly, some very terrible games that came out that year. So it wasn't a perfect year. I would say that, like, because of all those shitty games, this is probably the second best year we've talked about thus far. Arguably. I can flip-flop between 2013 or 2016 if I'm just going to be genuinely honest. Because I think those were definitely the strongest years that we talked about so far as video games. Unfortunately, though, that doesn't necessarily reflect on the Game Awards. Because, well, as I've alluded to in the previous episode, we're going to be going away from what we consider the modern Game Awards. And we're going to go into what is called the Spike Video Game Awards. So, well, if you guys have any idea what the Spike Game Awards were, well, it was basically the first video game award ceremony that was done publicly. Because, well, let's be real here, video games, for a good chunk of time, wasn't really considered... It was looked down upon for the longest time. And while, yes, like, a lot of what people consider to be all-time greats when it comes to video games came out in the 90s and the 2000s, there was a huge stigma against video games. Up until, honestly, I would say 2013. Like, 2013, I feel like was kind of 2012, 2013, I would consider to be sort of like the beginnings of whenever that stigma was starting to finally go away. But that did not stop the original Game Awards from being actually some of the cringiest shit I've ever seen in my life. So, granted, 2013 was kind of a weird year for the Game Awards because it was hosted by Jeff Keighley, who's the current host of the Game Awards nowadays. But it wasn't necessarily sponsored by Spike, nor was it sponsored by a lot of the sponsors that are in the modern Game Awards. It was kind of a weird transitionary year from the old Game Awards to the new. And it showed, because if you guys try to rewatch this particular year's Game Awards, it's so awkward. Like, granted, it's not the worst year. Trust me, we haven't even reached the worst year of the Game Awards yet. That's going to come up actually very soon. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this was just... there was still a lot of corporate bullshit, which, I mean, that happens in the newer Game Awards, but, like, I guess I just mean in the cringy way. So, yeah, because they still had a lot of the dumb categories. Because let me tell you exactly some of the categories they had in the original Game Awards from, like, the 2000s and the early 2010s by Spike. Because they make no goddamn sense. Like, I mean, you had your typical Game of the Years, your Studio of the Year, Best Shooter, Action Adventure, Sports Game, Indie Game, this year even, RPG, all that fun stuff, right? And then they also had, admittedly, some kind of, I feel like, unnecessary categories, like, Best PlayStation Game, or Best Nintendo Game, Best Xbox Game, which I feel like is a bit, unnecessary, because it just feels like you're being tribalistic with a lot of the games that are releasing on said consoles. That, and also, well, at least starting with the 7th gen era, there weren't really that many exclusives being released as much anymore. There were a lot of games that were cross-platform, and that became a pretty common thing, I'd say, starting around arguably like the N64 PlayStation 1 days, but definitely PS2, Xbox, GameCube era. So yeah, it just kind of feels unnecessary to kind of divide like that. But those aren't the worst categories. Some of the worst awards given out include Best Performance by a Human Male, Best Performance by a Human Female, Best Game of the Decade, which included games from both the 2000s and 2010s. So not even covering the same like thing, and also that was from 2012, so it wasn't even like 2010. So, or how about this? NFL Blitz cover athlete. These, I'm not joking. These are literally on the fucking Wikipedia page for awards. And I know for a fact that these are not fake because I watched these myself, and it was actually terrible. So, oh yeah, strongest heroes of all time, biggest badass, which is just Kratos. You just won that one. So you get my point. Is that they did not take any of this shit seriously, is basically what I'm trying to say. Which is a damn shame, especially when you consider the fact that, like, when people think of the 2000s, they think of that being as, like, the best decade for video games. So, to have that be the thing is pretty sad, if I'm going to be honest. But, of course, let's go over what I'm going to have categories for. It's going to be the same as, like, the last one, and truth be told, the categories are probably going to be the same for at least the next couple of episodes, so I do apologize for that, but I do feel like these are the best categories for each one, each sort of year. But of course, let's go over the categories. So we'll be doing best game by a new studio, best action adventure, best RPG, best shooter game, best sim strategy, best multiplayer, best DLC expansion, best art direction, best narrative, and the game of the year. I know I've had that sports thing highlighted in red for a long time, and I apologize. It's just, you know me, I'm not that big into either of those categories. I will make sure that once we get closer to the 2000s, there will be more category. That will be a category that would be applied. It's just kind of an awkward category for me. But suffice to say, that will be a category. Yeah, I'm just checking the audio. But suffice to say, let's go over the rules for those who are new, because again, there was a huge wave of people who did come in and follow, which again, I generally do appreciate that. But of course, let's go over the rules for those who are unfamiliar. So, rule number 1. A game for it to have qualified on our Game Awards, it has to have been a game released within that entire year, between January 1st and December 31st of that year. Because we're not the Grammys, we don't do weird cutoff dates, and, well...
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
Exactly, Crash Thompson. So, we're not like that. Rule number 2, it had to have been a game that had to have had a decent to good launch. No games fixed after the fact will really apply. And admittedly, I was actually very close to giving one of these games that, but I had to stick to my guns on this. It sucks for me because I really like this game, but I just couldn't in good faith. And also, unfortunately, this was around the time when that bullshit was starting to become common practice. So, yeah. Rule number 3, no early access games. So, no games that were in betas, alphas, or pre-alphas around this time, and no episodic games. We're not having that bullshit here. We can have episodic DLCs, but not games. So, no. As far as Game of the Year, I think I'm going to change that top one where it's like needs to be 80% or higher. Basically, it's just games that like I know just have general, positive reception. That's basically what that means. Is games that I know that like a lot of other people like. And well, it can't be a remake. It has to be a completely original game. So, there you go. And then last but not least, only games that I'm personally interested in will be chosen because art styles and aesthetics are what matter to me. So that's just me personally. Before we get into the actual, categories, I do want to specify because I see Interpol later. You're in the stream. Welcome back. I will not be reading chats just so that I can focus on getting this done. Because at the end of the day, I just want to make sure I can get through this. So if I'm ignoring anyone, I genuinely do apologize. And you're completely fine if you couldn't make it yesterday. It's just yesterday was amazing anyways. And I will be making sure that tomorrow we'll be continuing off the streak of that sort of game that I was playing because that was pretty awesome. But anyways, let's go on and begin this sort of episode. And well, let's talk about best games by a new studio. Again, I would have done best indie games, but again, unfortunately, some of the previous game awards that we've done were compromised because unfortunately I did my research and there ended up being multiple games that weren't indie games that I ended up nominating, and well, here we are. But I am still gonna give nods to best games by new studio. As far as new games, admittedly this was just kind of I guess this was kind of a quiet year, I feel like, as far as like new like studio games, if that makes sense. I was still able to find like just enough, but this was a bit harder to find, both on the indie crowd and the AAA crowd. But I do actually think that I was able to find just enough games. And well, I think these are pretty good options. So, of course, we've got two pretty big ones. Actually, three pretty big ones, and an underdog game that I've got here. So, first off, Outlast. So, this, of course, we've loosely talked about Outlast 2 in some of our other episodes, but this was the breakout game for Red Barrel Studios, and, well, this game is still creepy even to this day. Like, as far as survival horror games are concerned, this is a pretty good game to choose. And anyone who's played it knows because of just how, I don't want to say photorealistic, but just how realistic it looks, but also just kind of the dingy scenario that you're in, because you're in a mental asylum throughout the entire game, and just the fucked up shit that happens in there is, yeah, it's a yikes. So as far as like horror games are concerned, and trust me, I'm not like the biggest horror guy. Like, I don't know, just horror games mostly are just not really my thing. But even I can't deny that this is in fact a solid horror game from 2013. And I mean, honestly, I could probably say it's the best from that year. And that's saying a lot considering that this was this studio's first game. This was their breakout game. And you could say what you want about Outlast 2 or the Outlast trials, but you can't deny that they have tons of talent, and this game proved it. It has problems, but it's a genuinely good experience if you play for the first time. And of course, the Whistleblower DLC is pretty good, but I'm not factoring that into this. But then you also have another game that was another indie hit, if you want to count Outlast or Red Barrel an indie game / studio. We got the Stanley Parable, which I don't necessarily know if I want to go and gush over about this game like a ton of people have, because you guys have probably heard about it, just kind of originally started off as a Half-Life 2 mod that became its own game, exploded into basically kind of being sort of, I guess you can call this an adventure game. It's similar to something like What Remains of Edith Finch, or games like that. It's more of a visual narrative game. And as far as like those are concerned, yeah, this game is visually impressive, especially for a game that is on the Source engine, which was already 9 years old by this point. So, yeah, no, this was a pretty cool piece of narrative bliss, as the pretentious guys like to call it. So, but let's get a little less pretentious though. Let's talk. I'm gonna also admittedly give a shout out to Path of Exile. Made, oh, by the way, Stanley Parable was made by one dude. So, as far as Path of Exile is concerned, I think it's something barrels is what I know. Barrels was a common thing for video, or no, it was. Let me look up their studio. I know this was their first game. I did do the research. Grinding Gear Games. That's right. Yeah, New Zealand studio, by the way, which you don't actually see a lot of. So, and well, this is a Diablo style game, and I actually really think it's really fun. Like, again, you're talking to someone who is a pretty big fan of Diablo style games. I just haven't been able to stream them because, well, admittedly, they take a long ass time. Also, I apologize for any sort of background noise. They do take a long time to like play, and I'm just someone who tries to focus more on trying to stream a lot of shorter games. But truth be told, this game is fucking awesome. If you love Diablo, go play this. Granted, it is an online game, so it's technically... Is this an MMO? I know it's like an online like RPG, but it has not as much bullshit as Diablo 3 or 4 had. So if you want an alternative, there's your go-to. And to see like a New Zealand studio have this be their breakout game, that's pretty awesome. And then last but not least, admittedly, I kind of feel bad about not really knowing about this series because I was honestly just kind of brought to light to this series because of, well, Jeff Keighley himself showcasing this at the most recent Summer Game Fest, where we've got the Steam World series, which is a robotic steampunk video game series. And this was sort of the first major game in that series that broke out this studio. Think of it as kind of like it's basically them kind of doing something similar to like an Oddworld, where all their games kind of are tied with each other in like this sort of science fiction like universe, I should say. And well, this is one of the earlier games in the series, and I felt bad because like I played this a little bit on my own, and I can see the appeal. Like, as far as like platformers are concerned, or just, Metroidvania style of games, this one's pretty unique because this one's it's a Metroidvania, but you kind of dig the platforms yourselves so that you can pretty much mine resources and just do the upgrades and all the typical stuff you see in Metroidvanias. It's a cute little game. Like, it's definitely a more kid-friendly game, which normally I'm not particularly someone who is a big fan of those, but I could recognize the talent that was put into this, and I don't know, I just think it's pretty cool. Pretty cute, even. But alas, we only have one game that we can choose here, and as far as I'm concerned, you guys already probably know what's going to win, but, it is what it is. Let's get the envelope out, and let's announce the winner. So, all right. So, you guys ready? Alright, we're ready. Alright, so the award for the best game by a new studio from 2013 goes to The Stanley Parable. I will admit, it was honestly pretty close between Outlast 1 and this game, but ultimately, I do feel like that this is probably the better game to choose. Again, this was made by only one guy. And yeah, I see chat. It's just one dude. Just one guy. Which is insane as far as like a visual story. Again, this game is basically one of those games that is a bit more of an art game. You know, basically games that are more about just kind of the visual aesthetics of just the game itself and how the actual visuals tell the story. It's a complicated term. We've played a few of those games. Journey, Limbo. I guess you can consider the 2008 Prince of Persia game in that category, or at least I do. So basically games like that. And as that's a pretty cool experience as far as I'm concerned. So if that piques your interest, I'd recommend this game. It's not for everyone, but I just feel like just out of obligation, this is probably the best choice as far as the best studio. Outlast is a close second, though. But of course, let's talk about action adventure, which was a category at the 2013 Game Awards. And well, even okay, I will be fair. The actual choices aren't the worst. I will give the old Game Awards that they at least improved their choices when it came to the different categories for each sort of thing. Problem is that it's done through the cringiest exchanges ever, and frankly, I am kind of sad that they were able to get away with it for the longest time. And, well, say what you want about Jeff Keighley, but he was able to shut down that shit. But what did the Game Awards of 2013 end up choosing? Again, not bad choices, but some that I don't agree with, and one of which people will be pissed off that I don't agree with, but I've explained about it a million times. I don't want to get into it. So you guys are probably already seeing that, like, there's only 4 choices here, which is the minimum for my show, but it's like, this is the Game Awards. Like, or, okay. Again, this was a transitionary year for the Game Awards, so as far as I'm concerned, not a bad, like, choice. Not bad choices. Actually, really good choices, as a matter of fact. I would argue that, except for one game on here, this is a good list. Tomb Raider is a pretty good game. We played it last year. I had a phenomenal time with it. I thought the gameplay and the story was pretty compelling. And just sort of the, having it be a reboot of a, beloved game from the late 90s or mid 90s, if you count 96 as mid 90s. I do, but we're not going to go over the semantics. And just kind of explaining a new origin story for her is something pretty cool to see. And again, I thought that was definitely a really good game that I played. Go check out my playthrough of Tomb Raider last year. It was pretty awesome. Another game that I heavily do agree with being on here is Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Honestly, a much needed shot in the needle for a franchise that used to release every year. Because, well, this game is fun as hell. And there's a reason why people put this game with such high praise. Because of just the pirate action you can do with the ship combat and the exploration that's added with this, and the fact that this was kind of... I mean, this wasn't the first true open world game in the series. Technically, there were, there was Brotherhood and Revelations that came up before, but this was definitely the first like truly grand Assassin's Creed game, for lack of a better term. And yeah, no, this game holds up even to this day. Like, I do consider this to be such an amazing title on its own right. So, yeah, no, easy, good choice on the old Game Awards thing. And I'll even say this. Let's talk about GTA 5. I haven't really talked about GTA all that often on the channel. Mostly because, well, I have played GTA games before. I played GTA 3, well, this, and as well as GTA's 3 and 4. Part of it is just because, again, just how I feel about open world games. I don't dislike open world games. I love open world games. It's just, I do feel like they do take up a lot of time to play. And I just want to make sure that I can, condense the amount of time that I'm playing a game. That, and also, well, this game runs like ass on my computer, unfortunately. And my computer came out a few years after this. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I wish I was able to play GTA 5 a bit more often. And I do get where people are coming from with this game. Hell, Goldie's been playing this game fucking non-stop for the past like few months. Like, he's addicted to this game. So yeah, I can get the appeal. I guess I'm just kind of iffy about it being a grandiose game, that a masterpiece that some people make it out to be. It's not the worst example on this entire, categorization as far as games that were nominated. We'll get to Last of Us in a second, but as far as I'm concerned, like, it's a game that I do at least respect, even if you could argue that San Andreas or GTA 4 can arguably be better games. So, yeah, that's at least kind of a slight hesitation that I have, but it's still a game that I would definitely nominate on here. But then we got The Last of Us, which I don't think I pretty much emphasized exactly why I don't like this game. It's just a game, again, for those who are new to the channel, I'm sorry, I just don't like Last of Us, man. I honestly could not stand it. I know, you guys can fucking shit on me all you want, but thankfully you don't know where I live, so, there's that. But, I'm sorry, okay, zombie games are just kind of a hit or miss thing for me anyways. I don't know. I'm just someone who prefers more action-oriented zombie games, like Left 4 Dead or Killing Floor, if you count that as zombies, because they're technically not, but whatever. Or like Call of Duty Zombies. I am not a fan of just kind of more survival games, which this isn't really a survival game per se, but it just kind of fits into the cliches that I hate about zombie games in general, where it's the same old story of just, a virus breaks out, there's a corporation or a group of people who try to, like, either tame the zombies or experiment with them so that they can find a cure, and it's just, it's a storyline we've seen 1,000 times in other zombie games, including games that, like, I can even defend. So as far as I'm concerned, I just can't stand zombie games all that much. But it's also just, it's a story we've seen before as well, with, Ellie and Joel. Like, it basically just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of, it just kind of annoyed. I guess I just also get really annoyed when people like proclaim this to being not only the best Naughty Dog game, which is not. Uncharted, there's multiple Uncharted games I do think are better Naughty Dog games, narratively speaking and just gameplay wise. Which, speaking of gameplay wise, it's really not that innovative. It's like your typical third person shooter that you've seen for years even before this game came out. But it's also just people treating this as like one of the best games of all time, like just highly praising this. And with the rise of Last of Us Part 2, Sony just milking this game's worth for all it is. That's where my annoyance with this game comes from. It's just Sony just overexposing this game so goddamn much that it's actually draining. And it didn't help with Last of Us Part 2 and the bullshit that they pulled in the 2020 Game Awards. But I just can't help but just say no. I'm sorry. I know people are gonna shit me on not liking Last of Us, but I don't care. I didn't even care back then, but I care even less now. Anyways, what ended up winning? Oh, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Actually, again, thankfully this is not a case of Hoodie-itis, so we're good. Hoodie-itis basically being the objective worst choice, winning a nomination, or winning the entire thing, for those who don't know. But what did I end up choosing myself? Well, if you guys know the channel, you guys know there's going to be a couple of picks that are going to be on here that you guys know I'm biased for, but I don't care. It's my show. I'm going to do it anyways. So let's start with the games that I replaced. Let's start with Splinter Cell Blacklist, a game that underperformed. What the fuck, guys? This game is awesome. Arguably, and I'm just going to say it right here, easily one of the best Splinter Cell games. It was the last Splinter Cell game, and thankfully, even if we never get a new Splinter Cell game ever again, you can't deny this game was a fucking banger. As far as just, stealth shooter action adventure games concerned, this game was fun. I know Michael Ironside being replaced by another guy I can't think of the name of as Sam Fisher was a dumb choice. They should have just went with someone else as far as being the main character. But regardless, I do find this game to be really damn fun. As a stealth shooter, as an action adventure game, as just an overall game. Go check out Blacklist, is basically what I'm trying to say. But then you've also got another game, which, by the way, notice how I put a lot of Ubisoft games on here. I actually didn't really intend that at first. Again, I guess this is just proving that Ubisoft was kind of like Bethesda back in the day, where people actually praised them, but now they're seen as a laughingstock for all the right reasons. But anyways, Rayman Legends. The last mainline Rayman game we've ever had as well, which is kind of sad, because this game was actually a huge improvement over the Rayman Origins prequel game that came out before. Because yes, I'm pretty sure that these were prequel games. No, yeah, these were prequel games to the original Rayman games from back in the 90s and 2000s. And yeah, no, this game is a fun platformer. As far as platformers are concerned, honestly, here's my hot take. I think this game was better than Super 3D Mario, Mario Land, or whatever that Mario game came out that year was. I said it. I said it. Nintendo fanboys are now mad at me. But in all seriousness, though, I do actually think that this game holds up as a 2D platformer is concerned. If you are a fan of 2D platformers, this is your game. So, easy choice. And then we've got, of course, one more game on here, which of course means a lot to me as a human being. But I know Sony fans are going to be pissed off about it, but I'm just going to straight up say this right now. Sly Cooper Thieves in Time is not a bad game. I don't know why motherfuckers online still say that this is a bad game. Dude, I have played bad games on this stream before, on my channel before. This is nowhere near the bottom. This is another FNAF security breach situation here, by the way, for those who aren't in the know. This is not the worst game of 2013 by a fucking mile. And by the way, again, I talked about this last year on our original podcast show, but like most people actually do agree with me on this, at least on like review websites. Like, it's not a bad game. Like, yeah, because like I'm pretty sure the score is like 75 for like critics, but then it's like, yeah, 8.2. Look at that. Look at that. Most people like the game. So it's not even like, it's not even a scenario where it's like, you know, it's a bad game that like everyone disagrees with. It's just unfortunately a small set of people on Reddit and fucking probably, not 4chan, this isn't really a 4chan game, but like Tumblr or something like that, who tried to push the narrative that this game was bad, even though this is probably the best game. At least game... okay, that depends, because Sly 2 is... well, that's a story for another day. But as far as like Sly Cooper games are concerned, it's still a good game. So, and I love it. I still think this game is pretty good. So, it only has 2 issues. And even then, only one of those issues kind of a non-issue. But as far as quasi-open world, action-adventure games are concerned, stealth game as well. Again, another stealth game. A lot of really good stealth games came out this year, by the way. Black Flag, Blacklist, Sly Cooper. This was a really good time period for, and Dishonored the previous year. This was a really good time frame for like stealth games. So, I mean, rest in peace, Metal Gear Solid, as a, okay, well, it's kind of back, but you get the point. Is as far as like stealth action adventure games are concerned, go check it out. By the way, it's not a platformer, but that's a whole other conversation. But you get the point. It is deserving to be on here, and I respect the hell out of it. Fuck you, Sony, for not, you know, giving this game a proper sequel and just deciding to remake games that already, you know, were made like 5 years prior before the fact, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, let's get into the actual winner of this category, which you guys might not expect. You're expecting one game, but I'm definitely going to give you guys a curveball on this one. So let's go over the winner. So the award for the best action-adventure game of 2013 goes to Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Blacklist. This game was snubbed. Hella snubbed. Although, to be fair, Rayman and Sly also got snubbed, unfortunately. But as far as games from this time frame, this unfortunately came out at just the worst time, because this game came out 3 months before the new consoles came out. Because yes, this was still a PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 release. It was not an Xbox One or PS4 release, which unfortunately fucked with this game's, you know, sales numbers, I should say. And that's a damn shame, because again, this game is so awesome to play. Again, the stealth is so good. Like, and again, Sam Fisher has never felt any better to control than in this game. He can do so many acrobatic things, which makes no sense lore-wise, but like, that's a executive, you know, problem. That's not really like a gameplay problem. But as far as like just being able to move around against walls and ledges and just, you know, going on pipes and shit, this game does it in a phenomenal job. And there's tons of ways you can actually play this. As a matter of fact, there's actually 3 branches you can follow depending on, your playstyle. You can either do completely ghost style, so just stealthing without killing anyone, Panther, which is, stealth but involving kills, or I forgot what the last one's called. I think it was called Warrior or something like that, where you just go loud. And the game allows that. You can play this as a third-person shooter. Granted, I don't recommend it, because this is a stealth game in its core design, but you can still do it. Though there are side modes that are pure stealth shooter modes, and those are fun, as well as like the pure stealth, side missions, and the co-op missions, which unfortunately you can't play anymore because they shut down the servers. But you can at least, experience all the other content, plus the campaign, which the campaign is pretty damn good. And even the side characters are pretty cool this time around. You don't really get to see that a lot in a lot of Tom Clancy games, because admittedly, although to be fair, Splinter Cell's always been better in that regard. But as far as pure action adventure games, this is the best bang for your buck. Let's go on to the RPG category. So, RPGs have had a bit of a bumpy ride on this series. There's been some years that have been better than others. Truth be told, this was a pretty good year for RPGs. Like, if you were a RPG role-playing fanatic, this was actually a pretty okay to pretty good year. Unfortunately, though, the Game Awards decided to choose a bunch of games that came out beforehand as the nominees. So, yeah, you can already see my problem here. Okay. Let me rephrase that. I get why they've decided to choose these games on here. Because, well, all of these are JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games. Because typically what happens is they release their games into Japan first, and then a year later they eventually release in North America and Europe. That's fine. I just don't like the idea of having the nominees being chosen because they came out in America later. I just don't like that, because it just kind of seems very America-centric, and it just kind of feels wrong. So, because, well, Ni no Kuni and Fire Emblem Awakening did not come out in 2013. They came out in 2012 in Japan. And, well, it's stupid that Final Fantasy XIV Online is on here, because that is a game that came out in 2010. I know it had the big update that happened in 2013 where they completely overhauled the game, but it doesn't change the fact that this is a game that came out in 2010. Why nominate it for 2013? They did the same shit for the 2019 Game Awards, by the way, which it's stupid then and it's stupid here. Which means the only game that even qualifies for their Game Awards is Pokemon X and Y. Which, I mean, you guys already know I'm not even a big Pokemon fan to begin with, so as far as I'm concerned, this is the biggest L as far as the RPG category we've seen so far. Not because this was a bad year for games, for like role-playing games, but because the Game Awards were stupid. So, which, by the way, Ni no Kuni won. I mean, if I was forced to choose any of the games on here, I would probably choose Fire Emblem Awakening, but we're not going to do that. We're going to actually do games that actually released in 2013, which there were quite a few. Some of which, well, not only have we talked about before, but even some surprise ones. I already talked about Path of Exile. I don't need to really explain that one. Diablo-style RPG that is actually free to play, by the way. So there you go. But also, Warframe came out this year, which actually surprised me. I didn't think that Warframe was that old. But, well, it is. And, well, it's still growing strong. Funny enough, I did actually play this like 5 years ago, back in 2019. And I remember there was some asshole in the chat who was like, "You're playing the game wrong," and I was being so awkward about it. But I mean, at this point, I've grown to the point where if you're gonna do that, I'm just gonna kick your ass off the fucking chat. So don't do that. But besides that, I played it and I thought it controlled really well. It was a very smooth like game to play. Granted, I will admit the tutorial is way too fucking long. It shouldn't be a 2-hour tutorial. That's dumb. But as far as, a science fiction MMORPG is concerned, with some third-person shooting mechanics, because it also technically is a shooter game, I thought it actually was pretty good in that regard. And unlike a game like Destiny, they never removed the original content from their game. So I give this game a million more. I give this tons of more credit in comparison to what Bungie did with Destiny. So, because they kept the content in their game, Bungie didn't. So, that alone is already good enough for me to actually give this a nod over Destiny. But then there were also some other games that came out this year that I think are worth a mention. Shin Megami Tensei 4, which of course is the long-awaited sequel to, Shin Megami Tensei 3, which came out way, way, way before this. I think, didn't that game come out in, 2003 or something like that? It came out a long time before. And by the way, for those who don't know, this is in the same... Persona is in the same series as this. So if you know Persona, well, there you go. But yeah, as far as... Yeah, 2003. Damn. So yeah, a long-awaited, sequel at this point. And yeah, this was a pretty good game in that regard. It had its issues, at least from what I can tell with Shin Megami Tensei fans and what I've talked about with my friend Saimori. But yeah, no, this is a worthy game. You know what else is also worthy? Another worthy sort of, continuation / reboot? Shadowrun Returns. A return to form from a long-running franchise. Because, well, let us remind ourselves that the last game that within this franchise that was released was back in 2007 and was a clearly cashing in on the whole, rise of esports. It was a first-person shooter. I don't know why I worded it that way, but it was a first-person shooter that was nothing like any of the previous Shadowrun games, and, well, people were pissed off, naturally, because why the hell make this a first-person shooter all of a sudden? This was an RPG series. Not that hasn't happened before, but, you alienated your fan base. Luckily, this game is actually pretty cool. It's another sort of, 90s-esque RPG, top-down RPG. And yeah, it's fun to play, as far as, that. And also a pretty cool sort of cyberpunk-esque world here that I think I can easily recommend to you guys. And then, of course, we've got Monster Hunter World 4. Ignore the Ultimate. That's the North American release because this game came out in North America in 2014. I'm nominating it for 2013 with the Japanese release. And yeah, no, this game was, of course, still a good game. Though I will admit, this is kind of one of the weaker games in the series. Not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to some of the other games we talked about, World or Rise or Help. We're going to talk about, slight spoilers for some future episodes, but there's going to be some other nominees for other Monster Hunter games that came out before this. And I guess it's just kind of awkward middle child syndrome with this game, where it's just, it gets ignored. And that's a shame, because I do think this is still a solid game in the Monster Hunter series. It just kind of has some issues. But I'm still going to nominate it anyways, because it's worthy of recognition. Let's go over the winner for this category, though, because, well, there can only be one winner out of the 5. So, all right. Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking the thing. All right, here we go. Let's go over the winner. So the award for the best role-playing game of 2013 goes to Path of Exile. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty good game. Granted, it's more of a wish fulfillment game rather than it and that's kind of why it won, rather than it being an original idea, because it's not the most original game. It's a Diablo style game, but that's why I like it, because Diablo is a pretty fun game in its own right. Well, the older games, not so much the newer games, i.e. 3 and 4. But as far as replicating what people originally loved about the older Diablo games, this game was able to do it with spades. And it also helps that the loot that you can get from all the bosses and even some of the enemies feels way more rewarding in this. All the classes are all fun to play, because you've got some ranged guys, you've got some melee guys. There's a ton of variety for you to be able to choose, for you to be able to play in this game. And, well, truth be told, this is the true Diablo 3 that we all really wanted in our hearts. Because Blizzard fucked up with Diablo 3's launch, and it's been downhill ever since with Blizzard. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a worthy game to, put on that pedestal. And honestly, I am kind of excited about Path of Exile 2. Just please don't fuck it up. Please. You guys did really damn good with this game. Just don't fuck up Path of Exile 2. How this is Diablo 3 in my mind. Please make that Diablo 4 in my mind. I beg of you of that. Please. Grinding gear, please. Just do that for me. Just for me. Alright. Enough jokes aside, let's talk about shooter games. Proper shooting games. First and third person. So, this was an actually pretty good year for shooter games, as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately, it may not seem like it for some of you guys, because, well, let's just say that, at the time, the 2 biggest FPS franchises at this era, they weren't doing too hot, at least initially. But this was a pretty damn good year for shooters, and once I show you guys my nominations, you're gonna agree with me. Hell, people in chat recently is going to probably be laughing, because, well, it's a game that I've been playing quite a bit in the past few days, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about what the Game Awards actually ended up choosing themselves, and it's 50-50, unfortunately. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Call of Duty Ghosts should not be a nominee on this at all. That, granted, I got some people being very vocal recently on my YouTube channel, finding some of my videos, and let's just say they were not happy about the fact that I don't like ghosts? Well, here's the thing. Ghosts, fundamentally, is just not a good game. Because the campaign is forgettable and bland. And uninspired. Hell, they reused assets from previous Call of Duty games. More so than, like, Modern Warfare 3, and that's saying a lot. The multiplayer is the most frustrating shit ever because of the fast time to kill, the shit maps that are way too big for their own right, and the balancing of the weapons being so in favor with camping that it actually makes this game borderline unplayable at points. And don't even get me started on whatever shit they tried doing with the squads mechanic. I don't even get it myself. It was a mechanic that they added that just didn't work. And they fucked up the way in which, survival from Modern Warfare 3 worked. They renamed it to Safeguard, and it's actually unplayable. That's an aspect that no one talks about, by the way, is the squads mechanic. It's actually, in concept, it could have worked. Because, you're basically it's basically just you versus one other player, and then everyone else in the match is just AI bots. That's fine. It's just the implementation of it was very shallow and not very thought out, well. And, like I said, it doesn't help that the game itself is extremely frustrating to try to play. Also, there's some weird animation glitches that I remember keep seeing in this game. Like, for example, with the P226, when you try to aim down your thing, you just randomly fucking jut your arm up. It's such a weird animation. The same thing happens with the M9 on the PS3. It's so bizarre. And again, it's not the worst Call of Duty game in the franchise. I will give them that. As a matter of fact, I think Advanced Warfare is way fucking worse. I hate Advanced Warfare with a passion. And, well, Vanguard's worse. I will give you guys that, because at least this game has one good thing going for it. Kind of. Extinction. Extinction can be fun. There should have been more maps, and, well, unfortunately, the later DLCs were kind of poopy. But as far as a full game, it's just a fundamentally flawed game. So, and if you don't like that, then I don't know what else to tell you. And if you're gonna shit talk me, well, I mean, I already had to delete fucking 10 comments who got pissed at me with ghosts. Which, I'm just gonna straight up say to you guys, that's just nostalgia talking. Because even games that I have nostalgia for, I am objective with my, viewpoints of them. And besides, there's shit out there that, I grew up with that, in hindsight, I despise now. So, if you like ghosts, that's fine, but if you're gonna shit talk me, grow up. That's all I'm gonna say. Anyways, then we've got Battlefield 4, which, this one stings me because I actually really like Battlefield 4. I think that it has grown to be one of the best games in the Battlefield franchise. Easily. It has the most content out of any Battlefield game. Well, weapon-wise. Maps-wise, I feel like some of the older games have that on, have a slight edge on that. But as far as just the amount of, maps and weapons, and I've streamed this game quite a bit for you guys, even recently. Yeah, no, this game's awesome. There's just one unfortunate problem with this game. It had a shit launch. Again, I really love this game. It's honestly one of my favorite multiplayer games of all time. PvP wise, I should say. But I just can't bring myself to put this as like a best shooter game because of that awful launch. And unfortunately, this was the era in which this was the beginning of it being a common practice for games to just launch like absolute dog shit and being fixed 2 to 3 years after the fact. Granted, this game's kind of an exception for me because I played this game after all that shit. I remember though back in the day, and keep in mind I was a teenager at the time, and this was around the time whenever I started hearing about wider gaming news outside of like Sly Cooper and some other stuff. And I remember everyone that I was surrounded by, they were shitting on this game so hard. Like, they were fucking just saying, they went fuck to town on this. And there's even still videos on YouTube up to this day that still have this game as a top 10 worst game of 2013. I don't agree with that, because, again, there's way worse fucking games that came out. But this game is the prime example of the unfortunate truth that, it is unfortunately a testament to the idea that you should get your launches right so that public perception isn't warped. It's the sad reality, but it's the unfortunate truth. And so I can't in good faith nominate it. It sucks, but it's true. Let's talk about the games that do deserve being on here. BioShock Infinite and Metro Last Light. Metro Last Light, I ended up finally playing it not too long ago. And yeah, no, this game's fucking awesome. I can definitely see why people were singing this game's praise when it first came out. As far as first-person shooters, like single-player first-person shooters are concerned, yeah, this game's hella fun. Granted, there's some major problems with it, and well, let's just say that like there are certain scenes in this game that are a bit I guess you can say exploitative, to say the least, just to kind of keep it a bit clean here. But as far as like a pure shooter game with a narrative and its sort of world, yeah, no, I can definitely see where people are coming from when it comes to Metro Last Light as far as a shooter game from 2013. So, yeah, this is definitely a good choice. But also, you know what else is a good choice? BioShock Infinite. Yeah, I said it. BioShock Infinite. Why am I acting kind of iffy? It's not because this is a bad game. It is a really good game. Granted, I know I haven't streamed this game, mostly because of the imagery that's in this game, and I don't want Twitch getting any bad ideas, because I don't believe in any of the shit that the villains in this game believe in, because they're actually the fucking worst. But as far as, like, public perception of this game, I've noticed in recent years there's been a group of people who have been pushing the idea that this is a bad game. I'm not just talking about like small fringes on the internet. I'm talking prominent YouTubers in recent years that I'm not gonna name just for personal sake, but just big YouTubers who've just been kind of, let's just say they've been sort of trying to downplay this game to the point where they basically alluded to being a very not good game, which I don't get. I know BioShock 1 is a game that is revered by a lot of people and is considered to be one of the best shooter games, if not one of the best games ever made. which is a mentality that I can at least agree in some aspects. I don't fully agree with that take, but I do agree in the sense that, like, as far as like visual storytelling and, you know, just sort of world building, and it's sort of, I keep saying sort of, I apologize, its gameplay department, with it being heavily inspired by System Shock, that doesn't mean that BioShock Infinite is a worse game because BioShock 1 is amazing. Like, I don't. Well, that, and also, it also comes from a lot of bad faith arguments from people who have issue with the way in which the story is told. Which I do have my issues with this story, but not in the ways in which those people say. It's more so just kind of the way in which they treat one of the main characters in this game, where they just completely switch on a dime. That's my issue with BioShock Infinite's story. Other than that, it's a really good story and a really good game as far as gameplay is. Yes, whatever. Anyways, it should not surprise you. BioShock Infinite was the game that won this. Also, I will fully admit, the cover art is really fucking dumb. This isn't even technically the original cover art. This is an edited version of it. But it's basically the same thing, except replace Elizabeth and that blimp with just a random American flag. It's so dumb. It's such a dumb cover. I will give people that. The cover, again, a cover for your game can make or break what the perception of your game is. I mean, I know people like to do the meme of like the guy with gun with, you know, because, you know, Battlefield 4 is doing the same thing. Splinter Cell Blacklist is actually a very similar cover to this. Yeah, Battlefield 4 is funny enough. I get that. I know it's a bit of a meme, and it is kind of funny pointing out. I'm not someone who's very stingy about that. That being said, though, this is one of the exceptions. This is such a dumb cover. Like, it's such a dumb cover. So, but okay, if we're not gonna do Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty Ghosts, let's pick up the pace a bit. If we're not gonna choose Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty Ghosts, what are we gonna choose? I mean, again, anyone who is just subscribed to the channel or followed, you guys are probably laughing right now. But I wasn't actually intending this. But let's ignore the obvious. Let's ignore the obvious first, and let's talk about Call of Juarez Gunslinger, and let's talk about Arma 3. So, Call of Juarez Gunslinger is a game that I'm shocked was even made, considering that the last game in the game was so bad that not only did they remove it from Steam, but that also has gotten into multiple legal issues. It was that bad. I've not played it myself, but I've seen gameplay of it, and yeah, it looks like it's one of the worst games ever made by a AAA company. But as far as, you know, sequels are concerned, this game, I'm shocked it was even made. This game is fundamentally a much better game than, honestly, arguably the other game, even the first two games in the Call of Juarez series. You can make a good case that this is the best game in the Call of Juarez series, and I would not argue with you on that. And what adds to this game is that it has, unlike the other three games, admittedly, is that this game actually has a bit of personality to it, which is something that a lot of people appreciate. It basically added some of the, you know, quirkiness that something like a Borderlands had. But, you know, done in a Western setting. And, well, not as over the top, but just kind of, it basically didn't take itself super seriously. But yeah, no, as far as, you know, Western games are concerned, yeah, no, this is a pretty good choice. If we're ignoring Red Dead Redemption, let's ignore Red Dead Redemption for just this second, okay? Because I know you guys are screaming that. As far as Western games are concerned, Call of Juarez is a worthy title of being considered amongst one of the best. So, and like I said, definitely warranted in being one of the best shooters from this year, with, sort of its wacky sort of, tone, and just sort of having a bit more of a comic book feel, and even sort of art style, because they added a bit of an art style similar to that of a comic book here. And yeah, it works. It's actually pretty cool. It kind of did the same thing that the game 13 did from 2003. And yeah, if that interests you, go check it out. Also, if you're someone who's interested in tactical shooters, Arma 3 is a really damn good choice. Like, there's a reason why this game still has a die-hard community to this day. And it's because it's a really good tactical shooter. Granted, you can argue that it's more of a platform than it is like a game. Fair enough. But that's kind of why I love it, because it is a sandbox shooter game, which, other than Gary's mod, I can't think of anything else that's like that. Because this game allows you to create your own sort of scenarios with the tools that are here. And even the stuff that is, pre-made for this game that are not mods at all. Yeah, no, this game has a lot to offer, even just on its core, thing. And even the scenarios that are put in the game itself and the campaign, they're surprisingly well done. So, if you want like a hardcore tactical shooter that has so much freedom, very similar to that of Gary's mod, this is honestly one of your best picks in that regard. So this is unironically one of the best tactical shooters ever made. Even if, yeah, it's more of a sandbox game. But again, I love sandbox games. Minecraft's one. I'm getting ahead of myself for a later list. Minecraft I love. Gary's mod I love. Arma 3 I respect. I don't play it as often because of just how big the game's file sizes are. But it is, and also just, admittedly, it does take a long time to kind of create your own scenarios, but I still like this game. And then last but not least, we've got Payday 2, which is hilarious because, well, I've been streaming that game a lot. And again, thank you guys for, if you came from the Payday scene, for subscribing. You guys are awesome. And this game itself is awesome as well. Payday 2 is the ultimate heist game, as I'm quoting myself from a video that I made like last year on YouTube. It's a fun as hell game. Like, as far as the amount of customization and the characters and just the locales and the heists, the missions, and the progression. Yeah, no, this game offers so much for you right there. And is a hella fun time to play. But let's, of course, go over what I decided to choose the winner. Which a certain populace is going to get pissed off, but those guys can, step on Lego for all I care. So let's go over the winner. So the award for the best shooter game of 2013 goes to... By the way, ignore any background noise. I don't know if you guys can hear what they're doing. It's my cousins. They're watching some sports or whatever. BioShock Infinite, by the way, is the winner. Not surprising anyone on this entire thing, but, well, yeah. This is a good game. I don't know why there's been this narrative of pushing this game as if it's a terrible game. It's not. It's a good game. it has yes, it streamlined the gameplay, but that's fine. It honestly, if I'm going to be honest, it was a return to form compared to what BioShock 2 offered, because I was not a fan. If anything, people should be giving shit to BioShock 2, because that game basically did nothing when it came to like innovating the like pushing the series as a whole. And frankly, I just feel like has aged way worse as far as like gameplay, and the fact that that game kept crashing on me multiple times whenever I was doing that stream. Absolutely not worth not worth the time, honestly. As far as like BioShock Infinite though, again, it has a very compelling narrative. And it helps that like, this is the first game where your actual protagonist talks, which is something that is okay, I'll be right back. So alright. Sorry about that. I made sure that they're not gonna yell, but because that's gonna get super annoying. Anyways, yeah, BioShock Infinite. This game has a compelling story because your main character actually talks, which is merely something that I actually do kind of prefer in games like this. It wasn't that like it was a bad thing in the previous BioShock games, but it's just like it just felt disconnected. Because I've always had issues when it came to silent protagonists that like had backgrounds. Because well, you have background in BioShock, so you can't really. Because if you were like a complete clean slate with like no real background details known about you, that's one thing. But it's another thing whenever you are playing as a character who is silent but has a background. It just you can't really self-insert yourself into the story like that. It just kind of ruins it. And well, they fixed it with this game where they actually gave Booker DeWitt a voice and his own thoughts and just kind of his own monologuing. So at the end of the day, I think that was a better decision. And also the gameplay, I don't want to hear it. I know people are like, oh, it's just dumbed down because it's just like Call of Duty. Okay, but like, here's the thing: is that like, and this is something that like people. Okay, BioShock. I didn't mind the weapon wheel within BioShock because I like a lot of like old school 90s and early 2000s games where you do have you carry all the weapons in the game rather than just only two. That's not really ever been an issue with me. But I do feel like at least in this game's instance, the like because they designed the mechanics around that, it plays way better than you would think. That and also like there are some people who do get really annoyed when they have to swap through like a million goddamn weapons. Cuz my friend Goldie, he played through all the games and he hated the way in which BioShock 1 and 2 weapon wheel worked, and he found the snappiness of being able to get all your weapons or well only have he felt like it was actually a better user experience by just only having just only having two weapons. So again, it's something that you can debate all you want, but at the end of the day, I don't mind either or. Regardless, the weapons themselves are very distinct. Yes, they're obviously altered versions of guns we've seen plenty of times before. M1 carbines, your Car 98Ks, which is funny because this game takes place before World War One, and those are all World War II guns. But I digress. And just sort of, basically, it's just an overall just better user experience, I feel like. So, say what you want, but it is a good game with a pretty good story, except for the random swapping of sides with one of the characters. That's something that I don't like. But anyways, and also just that dumb cover art. Just get a better artist to make your goddamn covers. If they didn't fire that guy who made the original cover, I don't know what else to say. It doesn't even look like Booker. He's just some random dude. He's just a lean. He's doing the Michael Jackson lean. That's what he's doing. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. I'm sorry. I know I keep repeating myself. But it's get your game covers correctly, as well as album cover. That's another thing. Album covers should fucking look badass like this. I rest my case. All right, let's move on to another category, Sim Strategy, which is actually a category that was not covered at the Game Awards this year. Well, unfortunately, I think I know the reason why, because, well, the Spike Game Awards were, let's just say they were very, let's just say they were very, let's just say they were very, I don't like using this term because it makes me cringe saying this, but like, let's just say they were very pro alpha male. I actually hate saying that shit. But like, yeah, which is ironic because, you're the fucking video game awards. And you know what's associated with video games? Nerds, geeks, all that fun stuff. So it just, and well, let's just say that even if you wanted to make the case of like, video games, most video game genres not really being nerdy, the Sims and strategy games were easily a huge target for being seen as like extremely nerdy, 10 times more than even first person shooters. So it is unfortunate, but again, that was just the mentality of a lot of people when it came to video games back in, the day. And for the longest time, up until, like I said, around the early to mid 2010s, it took a long time for video games to start finally getting mainstream, acceptance, basically. But I was able to still find games for this. That being said, this was another kind of weak year for sim strategy games. It wasn't terrible, because there were some good games that came out for 2013, but admittedly, I did kind of have to stretch my definition again. So I hope you guys don't mind. But I ended up choosing games that, yeah, they fit the definition. Company Heroes 2 obviously deserves to be on here. Granted, I will fully admit, I actually do prefer Company Heroes 1 over Company Heroes 2, but it's just more so a preference with some of the gameplay changes. Granted, they didn't do the thing where, yeah, like, Relic didn't do the thing where, like they did with Dawn of War, where the first Dawn of War was was like a traditional RTS, and then the second game they tried turning into a MOBA. They didn't do that with Company Heroes 2, thank God. But they did kind of add those elements, which, again, isn't necessarily a terrible thing, but it's just like, in my opinion, I personally prefer the more traditional RTS style. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this game deserves massive recognition. But also, The other biggest game from this year, Europa Universalis 4. Obviously, Hearts of Iron 4 being, Paradox's big, game, it would make sense that, well, as far as, their World War II, strategy games, it would make sense to also bring up their game that took place during the early modern period. So basically from the Renaissance all the way up until Napoleonic era, roughly. Though I will say this game is much harder to get into, I'd say, because there's so many. I mean, granted, Hearts of Iron 4 is already kind of a hard game to get into, but this game I feel like even more so. And that can turn some people off because this is a grand strategy game we're talking about here. So I would still recommend it, but let me tell you that like this is probably the nichest of the niches here. It's definitely a game where you gotta really love this game's like grand strategy, thing. I mean, it also doesn't help that like this game has a shit ton of DLC with it now, so much so that they added a subscription service to it. You can still buy all the DLC separately. Hell, I fucking bought most of the DLC by this point, so I don't have to worry about buying a subscription. I actually bought it off of Humble Bundle, which, shameless plug, down below, click the Humble Bundle link for the thing. But yeah, like, you gotta really, really, really like EU4. Although, speaking of games that I actually do kind of like, Divinity Dragon Commander, a spin-off to the Divinity series, which of course started off as an RPG series, but they experimented with the strategy genre, where, you got to play a Total War-esque sort of game, more streamlined than Total War, but still similar concept, where you control your empire like in a turn-based grand strategy, and then you go into battles individually. And how you can even go into the battles yourself as that dragon that you see on the screen, which is pretty damn cool. I will give Divinity that. Like, that is such a cool mechanic. And there's even a bit of a narrative thing going on with like a lot of your generals. And yeah, that's pretty cool, at least in my mind. So yeah, like as far as like a narrative-driven strategy game is concerned, which, yeah, that's not really a common thought. Yeah, no, this works. And then, of course, we've got Gran Turismo 6, which, at least as far as I'm concerned, was a step up compared to GT5, because people liked GT5, but people thought it was a step down compared to GT4. And so, because of that, GT5 is kind of seen as like, eh. But GT6, I think, is a much more respected game overall. And, I mean, Gran Turismo has always been really damn good when it came to its racing games. Well, except for 7, but, that's a whole other conversation. But, yeah, I would definitely say that, like, Gran Turismo as a racing game purely, at least with this installment, it did pretty well. Definitely better than Forza this year, because yeah, Forza unfortunately kind of had a crappy year in 2013, unfortunately. But let's go over the winner. I think it's good. This one, people might be kind of tossed up with what I'm gonna choose, because yeah, there's not really one obvious winner, but there is one in my mind, and you guys are about to see it real soon. And I'm going to show you. Alright, so the award for the best 2013 sim strategy game goes to Company of Heroes 2. Yeah, I ultimately had to give in to this game. even though I prefer the first game, I still think that this is a quality RTS. It is a worthy game to follow up on. Admittedly, it did have some improvements on it, even if not everything was to my personal cup of tea, especially when it comes to AI balancing. I do feel like that unit balancing was definitely improved, that's for sure. And yeah, it is streamlined, but it is a bit more easier to manage overall, I feel like. Thankfully, they still do have the traditional RTS isms in this game, unlike what they did with Dawn of War 2, which is why I am kind of annoyed with that game. Not that that game's bad, it's just they shouldn't have gotten rid of the base building aspect. And yeah, it is just an overall still quality title. And as sad as I'm gonna be when I say this, and even though there's been some good games released afterwards, but it does kind of make me sad to say that this was the last great real-time strategy game ever made. And that does kind of make me sad.
What a shame.
Yeah, it is a damn shame. I really, really want there to be another great RTS game, but since Company Heroes 3 wasn't able to even do well, and Halo Wars 2 wasn't really, I'd say that's still a good game, Halo Wars 2, but I guess when I mean great, I mean games that people refer to as the GOATs. And yeah, this is the last one. And that was 11 years ago. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. But let's not, get too sad, because thankfully we're, let's talk about multiplayer. Funny enough, they didn't actually do a multiplayer category, which really surprised me, because I was thinking that they were going to do a multiplayer category, because they talk about Call of Duty all the time in there, and they talk about Halo and Battlefield. So to see them not have a multiplayer category actually did surprise me. And since we've already established that, as much as it hurts me, we're not going to be nominating Battlefield 4, we at least have a few choices. Games that we already talked about: Warframe, Company Heroes 2, Payday 2, and Arma 3. Mostly sequels, but still worthy games to nominate for. Of course, Warframe, being an RPG, is more of a cooperative experience, but it is still a fun experience nonetheless, and is a game that I would still recommend over Destiny. Again, fuck you, Bungie, for removing content. You made me not give a shit about your franchise, and make me worried about what you're going to do with Marathon. Granted, it might still be better than your original Marathon, but that's a whole other conversation. So, but yeah, Warframe, I would recommend as far as RPGs are concerned, and multiplayer RPGs. Company Heroes 2, I just explained why that game's pretty good. I think that as far as real-time strategy games, you can have a lot of fun playing against other players, or even playing with others against AI. And yeah, just overall have a pretty fun time. Especially since the base game of Company Heroes 2 is it's set in the Eastern Front of World War II, so you get to Russia versus Germany, which is nice. And yeah, just kind of have some good back and forths. Obviously, Payday 2 is a game that I hold in high respect as far as cooperative shooters are concerned. I still find the game to be pretty fun, even with all these years considered, with the amount of content and updates that this game has gone through. Even just putting all of the updates aside, Payday 2 is still amongst one of the best games to come out of that era as far as cooperative experiences are concerned. And Arma 3 being an amazing sandbox tool that you can use to create your own scenarios, both for PvP and PvE content in a large open world environment, is pretty awesome to see. And yeah, it's just fun to be able to come up with like, massive big scale scenarios for whatever you please in that game. I know that was a quick thing, but again, we've already talked about those games, so I don't really feel like I need to talk about, much from that. But again, this still showcases that like 2013 was a really damn good year for games. Like, oh my god, it's insane. But let's go over the winner. So, the award for the best multiplayer game of 2013 goes to Payday 2. Again, this is hilarious because I was just playing this game yesterday and on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday I had shitty internet issues, but this is still a fun game. And again, thank you guys so much for following me after those streams, because this game is pretty awesome to play. Like, I love this game. Again, it's a heavily improved sequel compared to the first Payday. Not that the first Payday was even bad at all. It was still a good game. It just, you can tell that there were some things that needed to be worked out, and they worked them out in the sequel. Unfortunately, the threequel they fucked up on, but we will ignore that. Also, even just with the base game, there's still a lot of varied missions and heists that you can pull off. Whether it be, the big, city banks that you can go to, or your smaller, local banks, or, the occasional mercenary work, or the, obviously we're starting to get into DLC territory here, but even just stealing nuclear bombs and, run down cities in LA, like, near LA, well, LA, like, the area of LA, or going to Russia, or going to Mexico, breaking, tons of prison breaks. Like, this game has a lot of amazing content. And again, that even includes the amount of skill trees that are in the game, because you have your sort of specialization, but then you've also got your ability skill tree that you can actually swap between in between each heist. So you're not just stuck with one particular sort of class per se. And of course, there's tons of customization. And truth be told, I think this game has the most guns I've seen in any first-person shooter. I can't think of any other game that has added in more weaponry than this game. Like, this game easily has, 200 weapons, minimum, which is insane. Granted, that it goes into DLC territory, but you get the point. Is this game is the most bang for your buck that any franchise can offer, and what makes it even better is that there's sales that have gone as low as $1 for just the base game, 50 cents even, which, that is insane. Granted, again, the DLC, there's a ton of DLC, and that's when the price starts to really ramp up. But my suggestion for you is, if you want to get the DLC, wait for the summer sale. The Steam summer sale is about to happen, and trust me when I say this, that is a perfect opportunity to get that stuff. And as I've said, I do consider this to be amongst one of the best co-op games ever made. Hands down, it's a blast to play. Even if I'm the type of person who does not like playing on the higher difficulties. Again, don't make me play higher difficulties again. I will actually fucking time you out if you get mad at me for that. Because I like having smooth experiences with little to no bullshit. Because I'm about the experience rather than the challenge. Let's move to best DLC expansion, which this also kind of surprised me a bit that they did in fact have a DLC expansion category in the Game Awards originally. They got rid of it with the newer Game Awards, but yeah, this was a category that they had. Which, yes, that does mean from now on we are going to be having our comparisons being made. So, which starts here, and well, unfortunately, it's not
good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's definitely not games that I would have chosen. But let's go over them. So, yeah, you guys are already seeing the problems here. The problems are arising. So, first DLC that was nominated was Mass Effect 3, which the game, okay, here's the thing. Mass Effect 3 is not a bad game. It just had a shit ending. Where even as someone who hasn't really played a Mass Effect game in depth before, even I'm like, yeah, that's dumb. So to have DLC for that, I mean, okay, to be fair, I've nominated DLC for games that I didn't nominate, so I'd be a hypocrite. It's just, I don't know if it's the best choice for a game like this. And then, of course, that gets us into, well, one particular choice in here that, admittedly, I am not the biggest fan of it being on here for multiple reasons. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Now, if you guys know me, I can't stand overly exaggerated 1980s nostalgia references. It's something that I've always hated, and I will continue to hate. There are very, 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 very few exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, it is something that I do hate. I don't care if, you like the 80s, just don't shove it down my throat. And, well, like I said, this DLC was extremely guilty of that. Honestly, Tiny Tina, like, Assault on Dragon Keep also kind of did something similar to that as well, which just makes that game, unfortunately, like, I don't know. Borderlands is a weird series with me right now, but we'll talk about Borderlands, I guess, in the 2012 list. Whether or not it's going to be nominated or not, that's for you guys to wait. But as far as both of these, I don't know, man. Well, okay, it also doesn't help because Far Cry Blood Dragon isn't really technically a DLC or even an expansion. It's a standalone experience. It's a separate game. It's another case where it's another sequel that isn't really a sequel. For example, Halo 3 ODST. It might as well drop the 3 in that because it has nothing to do with like the main storyline of Halo 3, except that a certain character from Halo, like from the Halo trilogy, appears at the very end of the game. So yeah, it's not really a sequel. Or sorry, yeah, it's not really like a DL. In that sense, Halo ODST is not a DLC to Halo 3. Call of Duty 2 Big Red 1 is not a DLC to Call of Duty 2, and this is not a DLC to Far Cry 3. It is a completely different game. Which honestly makes it the worst choice here. I'm pretty sure they did the same thing with Assault on Dragon Keep as well, where they made it a standalone, if I'm not mistaken. Granted, it didn't have as much blatant 80s bullshit in it, but I still don't like it. So, The one DLC I actually do agree with being on here, though, Dishonored, The Knife of Dunwall. Dishonored is a fucking amazing game. Again, another stealth game that I highly respect. And so naturally, of course, I would give a lot of praise to Dishonored and its DLC in this case. Kind of doing its own storyline with the DLCs. This is the second one in the trilogy of DLCs that they released for that game. And yeah, no, it's a good middle to an already amazing game in its own right. Though it should not surprise you that I'm unfortunately, hyping you guys up because unfortunately we got ourselves another case of Hoodie-itis here. Blood Dragon 1. I know people love this, but it's not a DLC. It's a separate game. This is kind of the opposite problem that we've had in some of the previous episodes, where they kept nominating expansions and DLCs with other games, and then this is a case where they nominated a game with other DLCs. So yeah,
that was his mistake.
This is so bad, I'm not gonna lie. And again, it's mostly because of what this represents. Again, it's just the 80s pandering I can't stand. I've always hated the 80s pandering. So, but what would I have chosen instead? Yeah. This is a much better list here. And frankly, a list that I think most people would agree with. So, okay, Assassin's Creed 3. Let's talk about that first. Assassin's Creed 3, I will admit, isn't one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games. I don't think the game is terrible, but it does feel weak in certain areas. But I will admit, this was kind of a cool sort of a alternate history path here. Basically asking the question of, what if George Washington declared himself as a king and basically just kind of got mad? Yeah, that's a cool scenario. I will definitely give it that. And granted, it does have a twist ending. And to be fair, this was an episodic DLC. Though, like I said, I'm not against episodic DLC. As a matter of fact, Knife of Dunwall is an episodic DLC. I'm just against DLC, or I'm just against full-fledged games being episodic. That is what I have an issue with. Release the full game at launch, and then do the DLC as episodic, if you want to continue the story. Don't, piecemeal the base content. But, yeah, as far as, an alternate, scenario, yeah, this was an interesting one. It's not the most unique concept as far as DLCs are concerned, but it was a worthwhile time. But then, of course, 2012 was the year of Black Ops 2, and so naturally, we're going to talk about the DLC, which we also played recently, pretty much last week. Let's talk about Black Ops 2's Uprising. Now, admittedly, it was kind of a tough choice to choose which DLC I wanted to choose, because there's so many options you could have looked at. You could have looked at just the multiplayer, you could have looked at just the zombies. I decided to take the approach of looking at both, and at least in my opinion, I do feel like that overall, this is the best DLC as a package. Because here's the thing. The first DLC that came out for Black Ops 2, which I think it was Revolution, right? Yeah, Revolution. That DLC had fucking amazing multiplayer maps. That was the DLC that brought us Grind, one of the most popular maps in the entire franchise. As well as also some other really awesome maps, like Mirage, for example, or Mirage. I fucking love Mirage. But it also brought us Die Rise. which is literally the worst map in the game. I will stand by that, by the way. I know Transit's objectively worse, but at least that was an attempt of them trying something different. They didn't even try with Die Rise. So, there you go. And then Vengeance, well, yes, it brought us Buried, and it brought us the Ray Gun Mark II, which I, respect both those. The multiplayer maps, I feel like it's a 50-50 on the multiplayer maps, because it did bring us Rush, which Rush is cool. Cove I like as well. Uplink is okay as like a remake of Summit. It's not my favorite remake in Black Ops 2 though. And well, truth be told, I do think that I think it's called Detour. I don't really find that map to be pretty good. And then Apocalypse, which did bring us Origins, which is the best zombies map in Black Ops 2. But the maps for multiplayer were lame. Don't tell me that Pod's your favorite map in Black Ops 2. You can't, with a straight face. And, well, I mean, it was cool to see Dig, Courtyard from World at War be remade, and Standoff, or not Standoff, Stadium from BO1 be remade into a different map. It's just, I just feel like those aren't, when people think of Black Ops 2 maps, those are like the least memorable ones. Even Frost. Like, people don't think of that DLC as far as multiplayer maps. They see it mostly as a zombies DLC. So that's why I find, at least in my opinion, Uprising to be the best, because it brought us Mob of the Dead, which, again, Mob of the Dead, I think, is definitely one of the better maps in the game. But it also brought us, honestly, some of my favorite maps in the entire series. It brought back Firing Range in the form of Studio, which Firing Range is a better map than Nuketown. I will stand by that. But it also brought us Encore, which is the Stadium map, which I think is pretty cool. And then Magma, which I think Magma is one of the coolest maps. It's set in like a lava-flown town in Japan. And that's such a cool concept to me. So I'd say the weakest map is probably Vertigo, but as far as layout, that still is a good map. Being a skyscraper in India. So it's still a good map. It's the weakest map in that DLC, but come on. That's still a pretty good selection of maps. So I think I rest my case. And then finally we got XCOM Enemy Within, which, again, I love XCOM style games. XCOM proper, of course, is a game series I respect. And, well, Enemy Within is a worthy continuation of Enemy Unknown as far as DLC is concerned. Adding in more content. Adding in robot, cyborg characters. It's pretty awesome to play. And I highly recommend it if you guys check it out. But there can only be one winner. So, the award for the best DLC of 2012 or 2013 goes to Dishonored, The Knife of Dunwall. Again, you're talking to someone. It honestly could have been. It honestly was a pretty close one between BO2, XCOM, and Dishonored. I ultimately chose Dishonored's DLC though, because as much as I like playing Black Ops 2 and as much as I love XCOM games, I love stealth games. And yeah, like I said earlier, this is a well-warranted well-warranted continuation of being able to play the game. It's not directly tied to the base game, but just kind of continuing that, the arc that was in the DLCs and adding in new abilities. It was a pretty fun time. And yeah, it still feels very similar to the base game, but just the fact, again, the base systems are so damn good because of just the the sort of like tools that are at your disposal anyways. Like honestly, it is kind of weird calling this series Dishonored because this might as well just be another Thief game. But that's a whole other discussion. But at the end of the day, Dishonored DLC is pretty good, and I would recommend you guys check it out. All right, best art direction, which it's pretty obvious this was not a category at the Older Game Awards because they didn't give a shit. But there were a lot of games that experimented with different visual styles, like in 2013. Like, it actually surprised me looking back at everything that we looked through. But I did ultimately choose up to 6. And well, yeah, I'd say these are all fair pickings here. Rayman Legends, of course, being a beautiful game in its own right with its 2D like art style and just colorful palette. I think it looks pretty good. And just as far as like the Rayman aesthetic, yeah, it's pretty good. Call of Juarez Gunslinger, with its comic book sense of personality and style, makes it very distinct even compared to not just games that was in its original series, but even other games in general. And it just kind of adds a bit of flair to an already just kind of underrated game. Stanley Parable, because of its use of just sort of trippy, almost dystopia setting, but done in a contemporary style, really does make it stand out as far as indie games are concerned, and even just other Source Engine games as a whole. SteamWorld Dig, because of its sort of Wild West steampunk aesthetics, and it being a bit more on the cutesy side, but again, that is more reserved for art direction. And I think that its art direction, with it being a bit more robot, steampunk, Wild West hybrid based, make it look pretty cute. And it has that sort of Flash like game look to it, which you may love or you may despise. You can't deny that it's a pretty unique looking game. Path of Exile, with its sort of medieval gothic tone, demonic look as well, like again heavily inspired by the Diablo style of games that it was obviously trying to follow up on, but did it in a very successful way in my opinion. And well, of course, Sly Cooper, because it's an aesthetic I always liked as far as cell shaded games are concerned. So, and also doing a bit of a, granted, not as much in this game, not really much comic book. Actually, as a matter of fact, they changed the cutscenes in this game from being comic book panel like to just straight up like Nicktoon or Cartoon Network looking. So, which honestly I actually think looks pretty cool. You can argue which one looks better, but admittedly I do like what they tried doing here. But enough about this. It should be pretty obvious what the winner is going to be if you guys have been around the channel for a million years. But I don't care. So the winner of the best art direction of 2013 goes to Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. I don't care what people say. This game still has good art direction. You can shit talk the game all you want, but this game, you cannot deny, is not only beautiful, but it has amazing art direction with what they were going for. Again, it's an anthropomorphic world, so if you're like a diehard furry or whatever, that's definitely going to be your jam. But even just putting that aside, honestly, I feel like this, like, you see it right there. I do honestly feel like, as far as like visual aesthetics being brought into a more powerful like piece of hardware, because Sly Cooper obviously started as a PlayStation 2 series, where while yes, it was stylized, and it was still a stylized series, sort of before that, you can kind of tell that like it was still a bit flat looking in areas. So to see a game kind of add in some more realistic fur texturing on like all the different, character models, NPC models in the game is pretty cool to see, as well as just kind of translating that already amazing iconic style into like the obviously modern era at the time, but just kind of in a more updated look. And I'm even just gonna straight up say this: I never had a problem with the way in which the main crew looked. Like, I mean, yeah, they changed Murray the most as far as like, his design, but if I'm gonna be honest, it's not that bad. If anything, I think the 2014 movie trailer had a worse design for him, if I'm gonna be honest. And yeah, they did take some liberties to where it doesn't really like. You can at least still tell it's Murray, even though yeah, they did kind of mess with like the eye. I think that's the problem with Murray, is that they changed the eye proportions on him. Everyone else though, I'm fine with, as far as like their updated changes. Again, the worlds themselves are so goddamn beautiful. They are so mwah. Again, they are some of the, honestly, some of the best looking environments, honestly, on the PlayStation 3. Like, and again, it helps that this was a late PlayStation 3 game, so this game was definitely pushing the hardware to its limits. And it shows with just how beautiful this game looks, not just graphically wise, but also just the way in which it still keeps its distinct style with that very, comic book / cartoonish look. It actually helps in this game's favor. And again, I don't fucking care. This game is, I know this choice is biased, but I don't care. This is staying no matter what. Like, again, you saw the scores. People like the game. And if you're still salty about this game after 11 years, then, well, you need to get a life. Anyways, let's move on to the next category. Narrative, story, art telling, whatever. A category that, all the Giga Chads at the fucking, Spike Awards don't give a shit about. So, but I care about, because I like talking about a narrative. And it should not surprise you that these are games that we've obviously talked about before. So, admittedly, one of them I just kind of felt like I had to shoehorn in, that being Assassin's Creed Black Flag. But it's still a good story. It's just, I feel like the other games admittedly do it better. But I do think that, like, just sort of the story of just kind of being thrown into the mix of originally being a pirate, but then, slowly going into the Assassin Order, while originally being tempted to go into the Templar Order. That's not spoilers, by the way. That's literally within, like, the first, like, hour of the game. Don't worry. But just sort of, that slow but surely progression of, becoming an assassin. I find this to be one of the better compelling narratives in that, universe. And I do find Edward to be a much better protagonist than Connor. Is he better than Ezio, though? I'll leave you guys up to on that one, but Edward Kenway I do find to be a pretty compelling protagonist. And it also helps that, like, you know, the story's tied with other major like characters from, you know, the pirate scene at the time. So yeah. And then of course we've got like I said with Stanley Parable, again, I've already mentioned that at the very beginning of this, where, you know, it uses its visuals as the storytelling and just sort of the, you know, dystopia that is kind of being presented, or just kind of the mind-bending stuff here. Again, it's a very similar game to what Remains of Edith Finch. So if you're more familiar with that, it's kind of the same case here. And just that sort of, like, you know, indie feeling narrative choice, I can appreciate. And then BioShock Infinite, which, again, I will still defend this game's story. Because, though, the fact that You Know Who just is originally kind of a, you know, pseudo-neutral to pseudo-ally to then just straight-up villain is fucking stupid. Like, that is a narrative choice that I do hate. Unfortunately, a similar thing happened in Far Cry 4. I don't know what the hell was up around that time when people thought that was a good idea to do. Cause, like, no, that's dumb. But, like, other than that, the bond in which Elizabeth and Booker DeWitt, you know, gain throughout the entire game is pretty compelling. And also just sort of the meta commentary about, you know, destiny and choosing your own path, I find to be really well written. And while, yes, it can be hard to... It didn't explain it too well in the ending. I'm not going to spoil the ending, by the way. I want you guys to play it for yourselves. Like, the ending might be confusing for some people, but it makes sense to me. It's basically just kind of a you ultimately choose your own destiny story. That's essentially what it is. And I do think that they do it in a very compelling way. And of course, we got Tomb Raider, which, of course, as far as, you know, survival against the fittest, you know, being able to, like, you know, recover and, you know, set up and building up yourself in survival, and unfortunately with dealing with a lot of, you know, hardships and challenges that ultimately lead to a lot of sacrifices. It honestly was compelling to kind of see, and it did make me very sad at certain points. It didn't make me cry, but it just made me, like, sad, because I'm not the type of person who likes crying easily. So it's just, yeah, like, I felt for Laura whenever, you know, insert character was threatened. So, and it also didn't help that, like, the main antagonists are, like, very fucking, well, let's just say they get a bit too handsy at points, and they fucking deserve to get shot. So, yeah. And also just the supernatural elements are so cool to see in this game. But of course, let's get to the winner, as always. So the best narrative winner for 2013 is Tomb Raider 2013. Ultimately, I do think this... Admittedly, this was mostly between this and BioShock Infinite. But I think I ultimately decided that I wanted to give Tomb Raider the win on this one. Mostly because, you know, it's a bit more grounded as far as story is concerned. Well, except for the last 2 hours of the game. But I do find it to be a compelling sort of survival against the fittest stories. Or survival against the fittest story. Where not only do you have to deal with the natural elements, but also, like, these random, like, you know, like, scavenger guys, And even just the kind of fucked up shit that kind of roams around the island is just, it makes you feel for the characters. And thankfully the characters are written well. Their narrative is and stories are told pretty well. Not just Laura's, but all of her friends and her colleagues. And again, once you see more and more of them just kind of again, I'm not gonna spoil any specifics, but just kind of unfortunately get into some bad things, like, yeah, it just kind of makes you kind of worry about what's going to happen to them. And of course, the not just the natural threats, but also these, like, these raiders, as well as supernatural element. It adds to that tension, and it doesn't want, the way in which these characters interact makes you not want them dead. So yeah, I think that this game was able to achieve its story in a pretty compelling way. But alas, we've got one more category, the titular game of the year category. So, I mean, thankfully they didn't do the... Oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself for another Game Awards. But yeah, like, as far as 2013, yeah, pretty good year. Like, honestly, one of the best years we talked about thus far. Like, again, you can argue if 2016 or 2013 were better between each other, but I would argue that they are still respectable years. Did the Game Awards of 2013 recognize that, though? Yes and no. Well, yes, but then a little bit of no, in my opinion. Of course, Tomb Raider, Bioshock Infinite, GTA 5. Thank you, have a nice night. I just explained why. Those are both, like, or at least Tomb Raider and Bioshock Infinite. Of course. Admittedly, this is kind of a weird category, though, because literally 4 out of these 5 were all the nominees for Best Action Adventure. Oh, no, wait, no, oh, never mind, not Bioshock Infinite, sorry. Different game. Assassin's Creed. Okay, sorry, I just got confused. But yeah, like, yeah, those are fair. GTA 5, again, it's not that I don't like GTA 5, it's just lack of, like, true experience with GTA 5 thoroughly. As in, I've not completed the game. I know the story of the game. I already know the endings. It's just one of those games that, like, just takes a long time to get through the story. But it's fully respectable in its own lane. Just don't make those weird Family Guy jokes that GTA likes to do on occasion. That kind of makes me cringe. But the actual game itself, I'm fine with. And, well, I feel bad because I did throw a bit of shade to Super Mario 3D World. And I apologize if it seemed like that was a condescending thing. It's not. It's just, well, this came after Galaxy and Galaxy 2. So just kind of lowering it down a bit. And it just kind of felt off. And it also doesn't help that, like, I feel like out of all the Mario games, this one's kind of the ones that not a lot of people really tend to talk about all that often. Because when people talk about Mario games, they talk about Super Mario Brothers 1 and 3, Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, and then Galaxy 1 and 2, and Odyssey. Super Mario Brothers 2, Sunshine, and 3D World tend to get forgotten a bit. And with 3D World, it just didn't really do enough to justify, at least in my opinion, it didn't really shake up the formula enough to really justify really, me giving it as much respect as, like, at least some of the other Mario games, if that makes any sort of sense. It played it too safe, is what I'm trying to say. Not a bad game per se, but definitely not a game that I would say is game of the year. So, again, respectable in its own lane, but yeah. Last of Us, no. I've already explained why. I don't like zombie games, and also I just don't like how cliche the story is. And it would have been better for me if, like, I don't know. There's just so many things going against Last of Us for me. The gameplay, we've seen a million times before. The setting, I just don't really care for. Honestly, just kind of I don't know. Again, part of it, admittedly, is me just kind of annoyed with Last of Us nowadays, because Sony just can't stop treating it as if it's its fucking favorite child. And admittedly, part of it is because part of my fucking disdain from this game is because, again, this game came out the same year as Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, on the same console, and, well, considering that Sly 4 ended on a cliffhanger, and, you know, they promised a sequel, but they never made one, but then they made not only a sequel to this game, but also a remake of this game, not even 10 years after the fact, and charged even more money for it. And keep in mind, they already remastered this game back in 2014 for the PlayStation 4. And also made a TV show out of it, even though there was a planned movie for Sly Cooper. It just feels insulting. It honestly just feels like a slap in the face. So, and again, it doesn't help that, like, honestly, I don't really give a shit about the main storyline. Okay, yeah, your fucking daughter died. Get over it. You know, like, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. If you want a story about, you know, like Troy Baker defending, like, a younger, like, you know, female, go play BioShock Infinite. It did that story way fucking better. In the same year, too. Literally right next to each other. So, that's all I gotta say. GTA 5 won, by the way, which, I mean, fair. That's a fair one. I will give them that, and also makes sense because GTA 5 was like the biggest fucking game of that year, so fair. But let's go over what I would have chosen. So yeah, I did it. Last of Us fanboys can fucking cry about the fact that I replaced their Sony exclusive with another Sony exclusive with Sly Cooper. I just did that. I don't care. I still stand by that. I did a similar thing with 2020's list, and I'm pretty sure I did a similar thing. Oh yeah, no, I did the same thing with 2016 with the Overwatch. So, with a different franchise, of course, but I don't care. I hate Last of Us. I don't like it. I never liked it. I don't like the story, because, again, it's super cliched. And the fact that Sony's been treating it as if it's been its favorite goddamn child pisses me off. So, yeah, no, Sly Cooper 4, good game. And to those who shit on it, grow up. It's a good game. It only has 2 issues, and one of those literally makes sense if you literally played the games back and forth between each other. I'm referring to a story bit in Sly 4, by the way. So, granted, there is another story bit in Sly 4 that is weird, but thankfully it's not, like, lingered on. Grow the fuck up and accept that this is a good game that people like. So, and, well, I'm also going to nominate Splinter Cell Blacklist on this, because I think that game got snubbed as well. By the way, 2013, I feel like was the year where, like, was like the year that, like, game franchises ended. Because you had Sly 4 come out, you had Splinter Cell Blacklist come out, you had Rayman Legends come out, and you had Call of Juarez Gunslinger come out, and Bioshock Infinite come out. And despite that, we haven't had a new game in any of those franchises, like, released since. Which is honestly pretty sad. Granted, I will say, I'm not saying that, like, I'm someone who wants a franchise to last forever. Obviously, there is a point in which you want to end your franchise. It's the same thing with television. Why the fuck do we still have SpongeBob and The Simpsons playing decades after they should have ended? And I'll even say this with Doctor Who as well. Doctor Who probably should end really soon. So, yeah, like, long-winded, like, television franchises are bad. And, well, long-winded video game franchises can be a bit of a problem as well. That's why I propose that you just make at least one more game for Sly Cooper, and at least one more game for Splinter Cell with Sam Fisher as the main character. And if you want to bring back Splinter Cell, at the very least, like, do it, do it as like a torch, like, handing thing where you have another protagonist become, the main character for Splinter Cell. So, like, but yeah, as far as I'm concerned, though, Blacklist is a pretty damn good fun game that I do recommend you guys check out. And of course, I'm going to nominate Black Flag on here. The fact that it wasn't even nominated for Game of the Year is actually kind of confusing. Why was that nominated? Because that was a lot of people's favorite game from 2013. So, honestly, kind of a weird snub for Game of the Year. But, although to be fair, they already had, like, most of the games from the action-adventure category, but just whatever. But you know what? Yeah, sorry. I don't know what I was trying to say. But let's announce the winner for 2013. If you guys notice the pattern, well, you guys probably will have a decent guess of what's going to win. But anyways, here we are. So the award for Game of the Year 2013 goes to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Yeah. An Assassin's Creed game won Game of the Year. And not only that, but also, admittedly, I was conflicted. I was originally conflicted between GTA and this. But ultimately, I decided that I would personally choose Black Flag. But why? Well, even though, like, yeah, we didn't give it, like, any other award, I do think that overall, it is the best game. And again, as much as I love Sly Cooper, as much as I love that franchise, I have to be objective and say that, like, I think overall, Black Flag offers the best bang for your buck when it comes to content and gameplay. Because it has a good story. Maybe not the best story, but still a good story for what it has. It's a fun action-adventure game with tons of stuff to do, like side activities. The main quest is pretty fun. Land and ship combat, like, holy shit, the ship combat is so good. Even though it was slightly taken from Sly 3 Honor Among Thieves, but again, Assassin's Creed ripped off Sly Cooper, but whatever, we're not going to get into that. But as far as, like, you know, the game itself, this is honestly a fully realized vision for what Assassin's Creed was building up to up until this point, and really does prove how damn good you can make a good pirate open world game. Or even just an Assassin's Creed game as a whole. And well, speaking of, you could debate whether or not this is the best Assassin's Creed game. That is honestly a debate that I'm willing to hear. Because, you can argue if Assassin's Creed 2, or this game, or Brotherhood, or Origins are the best games in the series. And honestly, I would not disagree. So, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, this is probably the best choice. At least as far as, like, overall games. And yeah, I mean, I did see this on a lot of people's top, not just top 10, top 5s, top 2s even. Which is a testament to just how damn good this game was. So, hopefully Shadows is going to be at least a decent game. Unfortunately, people are getting mad at that game for the wrong reasons. But that's a story for another time. But yeah, let's recap. And look at that. Another year where everyone wins. Everyone gets an award. That was an awesome game. So, best game by his new studio went to Stanley Parable. Best action adventure went to Splinter Cell Blacklist. Best RPG went to Path of Exile. Best shooter went to BioShock Infinite. Best sim strategy went to Company of Heroes. Best multiplayer went to Payday 2. Best DLC went to Dishonored Knife of Dunwall. Best art direction went to Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. Best narrative went to Tomb Raider 2013. And the titular game of the year went to Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. So, everyone wins. As far as bonus round, top 10 favorites of the year, subjective liking of games, of course, or at least of games that we talked about. Here you go. Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. I'd probably say is my biased favorite, but again, I'm biased. But as far as other games, Tomb Raider 2013, Arma 3, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, Company of Heroes 2, Metro Last Light, Path of Exile, BioShock Infinite, Payday 2, and Splinter Cell Blacklist. So, yeah. And let's not forget about the guilty pleasures. Games that definitely wouldn't have qualified, but I still personally like. Some people are going to be laughing, but admittedly, I kind of liked... Okay. Dead Space 3 is an okay game. It's not terrible. It's not the worst game ever. It's just misguided. So, yeah. Speaking of misguided, Total War Rome 2. A game that, like, if the game was released in the state that it is now, it easily would have qualified for best strategy, but unfortunately, this alongside with Battlefield 4, which speaking of, is right there. Unfortunately, those were the beginnings of just kind of being more, or I guess technically something like Fallout New Vegas, or even... No, Skyrim had an okay launch. It had glitches, but it didn't have, like, game-breaking bugs. So yeah, these were the first two games, at least in my opinion, where that trend started to begin with the, disastrous game-breaking launches. And that sucks. Well, which, speaking of Rome, Rise Son of Rome was a Crytek game that was an Xbox launch game that got a lot of shit when it first came out. I didn't think it was that bad. It can be boring at points, but as far as like hack and slash games go, it's fine. There's worse games, I feel like, in that sort of subgenre. And then you got Amnesia Machine for Pigs, which, yeah, it's not as good as wow, why can't... The Dark Descent. Sorry, I blinked out of my mind. Fair, but it doesn't make it terrible. I will agree it's probably the worst Amnesia game, but doesn't make it bad. And then we have Samurai Warrior 2013. Again, there were so many choices for first-person shooter games that were really good in 2013. I just could not fit enough games. I wanted to give this game a shout out for being an excellent reboot of, you know, an old first-person shooter series from, or of an older first-person shooter from the late 90s that unfortunately hasn't aged the best, but you know. Oh yeah, by the way, Battlefield 4, again, I love Battlefield 4. I just couldn't because of its launch. So, yeah. But of course, that was the 2013 Game Awards for, you know, the Sly Army for you guys. So, I hope you guys did thoroughly enjoy this. Again, thank you guys for sticking around if you guys did. 2012 will be the next one, which I'm kind of feeling iffy on that one, if I'm going to be honest, because I don't remember 2012 being the greatest year, but we'll wait. But either way, I hope you guys did enjoy this particular episode. If you guys did, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. Excuse me. While you guys are at it, make sure to check out the links down below as well, specifically the Discord, SoundCloud, and YouTube, as well as all the other precious links. And if you guys haven't already, you can also hit that subscribe button. If you can't necessarily do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad the guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well and to continue awesome people in the process. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Sorry, I'm just making sure that this is going to be saved. Okay, yeah, it's going to be saved. Okay. Yeah, in any event, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night, guys. Oh, shoot. Wait, it's still going on. All right. See you guys later. Bye.